What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, coming at you with a comparison between Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G versus Motorola Moto G Stylus 2021. So let's get started. Now, while these two devices do share quite a few similarities, including a pretty similar but different design, and then of course a very similar name, the Moto G Stylus 5G is not just a Moto G Stylus 2021 with 5G added. There are quite a few more differences between these two phones, which I'll be going all over throughout this video. Now, as far as pricing and availability go, both of these phones are being offered factory unlocked, so that you can use them with a variety of different carriers. Now, to see the most up-to-date pricing and availability, take a look at the link in the video description. But most likely, if you do get either of these phones, you will be getting them through carriers. I know that the Moto G Stylus 2021, which was launched in January of this year, has already been extremely popular over at the carriers, and especially the prepaid ones as well. And it's looking like the Moto G Stylus 5G also will be making its way over to carriers too. So it's most likely that both of these phones will have very generous carrier discounts, and that's probably where most people will end up buying them. But of course, if you don't want your device to be stuck with any particular carrier, then you are able to buy these factory unlocked. So there are plenty of options when it comes to acquiring these different phones. Now, another thing too that I want to mention, just to clear any potential confusion. The Moto G Stylus 2021 is a different phone from the Moto G Stylus 2020 that was launched in spring of 2020. Now, on a lot of the packaging, like here for example, it just says Moto G Stylus, but technically this is the second generation Moto G Stylus. And then with the Moto G Stylus 5G, this is really the third device in the Moto G Stylus series. So since the names can be a bit confusing, I just wanted to be really clear there so that you know exactly which phones we're discussing here in this video. Now, before I show you a closer look at the actual devices, let's take a quick look and see what comes included in the boxes here. You can see that they do look very similar. Really, the only difference is that the Moto G Stylus 5G has 5G at the end of the name, and then we also have some extra 5G branding in the upper right corner. Now, as far as what comes included in the box, you can see that we're pretty much getting an identical setup here, and in addition to that, we're getting very similar booklets and SIM card removal tools in the box. So as far as what comes included, it's pretty much the same. Now, with both of these devices, we're getting 6.8-inch displays. So when looking at them directly face on, they pretty much look exactly the same. In addition to that, they both feature LCD display technology, they both have a 1080p display, they both feature a PPI of 386, they both have a 20:9 aspect ratio, so a more narrow but taller form factor, and especially different from some of the 16:9 smartphones that came out in the past. And the only difference really is that with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting an 85% screen-to-body ratio, and with the Moto G Stylus 2021, we're getting an 84.8% screen-to-body ratio. So both of those metrics are very close there, but basically what that means is that with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we are getting slightly smaller bezels, but thankfully, with both phones, the bezels are decently small all throughout. You can see towards the bottom here in both devices, it is a little bit thicker, but I do appreciate that with both phones, we are getting hole punches for the front-facing cameras. Now, speaking of that, both phones feature 16 megapixel front-facing cameras. And definitely take a look at my dedicated review videos that I've done for both of these phones to see photo and video samples from them. But essentially, expect to get pretty good quality from the various cameras on these phones. Now, as far as internal storage goes, there are some differences. Now, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting 256 gigabytes of internal storage versus 128 gigabytes of internal storage with the Moto G Stylus 2021. So we are getting about half the amount of storage. Now, thankfully, with both of these phones, we really are getting a generous amount of storage. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to happen, but I could see it happening. And that is that if the Moto G Stylus 5G does make its way over to some carriers, then it is possible that they might have a version of the phone that does have less internal storage. But at least for the factory unlocked models, we're getting 256 gigs with the Moto G Stylus 5G, and then 128 gigs with the Moto G Stylus 2021. And then both phones also do come with microSD card expansion, which is nice to have as well. Now, neither of these two devices feature wireless charging. However, they both do feature fingerprint sensors, and that is the first major difference between these two phones. So with the Moto G Stylus 5G, the fingerprint sensor is actually located on the back of the phone. Now this isn't really a big deal, but I do prefer it to be on the power button, and you'll see in a second that's how it is with the Moto G Stylus 2021. But you can see a very nice, fast, responsive fingerprint sensor, and it's pretty much the same exact situation here with the Moto G Stylus 2021. The only difference though is that you can see again, the power button is also the fingerprint sensor. Now I personally prefer this because if I'm going to turn on the display anyway, I typically will put my finger on the power button, so having that double as the fingerprint sensor really does make a lot of sense. Now thankfully also, with both of these phones, we are getting face unlock. So if you are used to doing that maybe on a previous device, then just know that with both of these, you are getting that feature. Now as far as the cameras go in the rear of the phone, you can see that the designs of the actual camera modules themselves are a bit different. However, with both devices, they really are feature packed. So with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, a 5 megapixel depth sensing camera for close-up images, and a 2 megapixel macro camera to assist with portrait mode. And essentially, with the Moto G Stylus 2021, we're getting the same exact setup, except the macro camera here is 2 megapixels instead of 5. I don't really see that as being a big deal personally, but I did want to let you know about that. Now, as far as portrait mode goes, with both phones here, we're getting portrait mode with both the front and rear cameras. So if you like to take photos with those nice blurred out backgrounds, then you will be able to do it with either of these two phones, which certainly is a very good thing. Now here's how things look on the camera apps on both devices. Now what you're seeing right now is through the main cameras on both phones, and you can see it's a pretty similar setup here, especially on the app. Now then from here, we can switch over to the ultra wide angle cameras to fit a lot more content into the frame. Then from there, we can go over to the macro cameras to get nice close-up images that are in good detail. Then we can also go over to this little menu in the corner, and we get a bunch of other features as well. Now for the most part, it is pretty similar here. For example, both phones have portrait mode, which you can access right there. However, one big difference is that with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we do have dual capture, and essentially what dual capture does is that you can capture video with both cameras at the same time. It's kind of self-explanatory based on how it looks, and definitely only is useful in very niche situations, but it is a feature that you don't get with the Moto G Stylus 2021. So if you do want to get this feature, then you are only going to be able to get it with the Moto G Stylus 5G. Now, of course, like I said, you can go over and go to portrait mode on both phones. You can do this with both the rear and front cameras, so that is very awesome there. Now there's two different things related to video mode on these two phones that I want to make you aware of. The first thing is that with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we do gain the ability to take video using the ultra wide angle camera. Whereas, as you can see here, with the Moto G Stylus 2021, we only can take video with the main camera and then also the macro camera. So we also have that ability here with the Moto G Stylus 5G, but as far as taking videos with the ultra wide angle camera, that really is only possible here with the Moto G Stylus 5G. Now another key difference that I want to point out as well, and this one's pretty significant, and I actually noticed that quite a few other major tech publications got this incorrect, but from what I've seen, the Moto G Stylus 5G does not support 4K video recording. And that actually is pretty surprising. I would have expected this phone to have that feature, considering that the regular Moto G Stylus 2021 does have it. But I don't know if it's a processor limitation or just a software limitation, but you can see here, when you go to toggle the video settings, for the Moto G Stylus 2021, we have an option to switch between 4K and Full HD. Whereas with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we don't have that option. We only get the option of switching the frame rate. So that is very awesome, of course, that the phone does support 1080p video at 60 FPS, but both phones support that for that matter. So basically, if you want to get a phone that can take 4K video with the rear camera, then the Moto G Stylus 2021 4G model is the only phone out of the two that supports that. So that is very surprising there. And I think a lot of people generally expect the upper end variant of this device to have 4K video recording, because why would you lose that feature going from this phone to this phone? But apparently, that's the decision that Motorola decided to go with. Now, I don't know if whether or not having 4K video recording with the Moto G Stylus 5G is necessarily a deal breaker for you, but if it is something that you do like to have, then just know that with this phone, you're not going to be getting it. Now, it is possible that in the future, they might do a software update that does give us that feature back. And if that's the case, then I suppose everything I'm talking about right now will be outdated. But at least at the time of recording this video, I cannot find a way to take 4K video with the Moto G Stylus 5G. Now, as far as the RAM and processors go, there is a big difference with these two phones. So the Moto G Stylus 5G features 6 gigabytes of RAM, and then we're getting the Qualcomm Snapdragon 480 5G processor. Whereas with the Moto G Stylus 2021, we're getting 4 gigabytes of RAM, so 2 less, and we're getting the Qualcomm Snapdragon 678 processor. Now, typically with Qualcomm processors, the higher the number, the better the processor, but that's not always the case. So in this situation, the Qualcomm Snapdragon 480 5G is a very new and recent processor from Qualcomm, and I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test with both phones here, and you'll see from this test that actually, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we got slightly worse performance compared to the Moto G Stylus 2021. So you can see right here, we got a single core score of 494, and then a single core score of 538, and then multi-core scores, which you can see right there. I don't have to read all that out. But essentially, it looks like in general, you should expect to get better performance with the Moto G Stylus 2021. So that is a bit disappointing and surprising to see. However, it does make me extra grateful that with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we are getting that extra RAM, because apparently that's pretty necessary to make up for the processor being a bit weaker. Now, as far as battery capacity goes, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting a 5,000 milliamp hour internal battery, so a very big battery here, and we're getting a bit less battery capacity with the Moto G Stylus 2021 at 4,000 milliamp hours. Now, even though it is 1,000 milliamp hours less, in general, I still think this is some pretty solid battery capacity. Now, one disappointment though is that with both devices, they are limited at being recharged at 10 watts. So that's not necessarily terrible, but at the same time, with many other phones now charging at up to 20 watts, you won't get necessarily the fastest charging speeds with either of these two phones. And that probably will be even more obvious to you, considering how big the batteries are to start with. Now, thankfully, since the batteries are very large with both of these phones, and especially the Moto G Stylus 5G, it's very unlikely that you would go through an entire battery in a day, but it still is something that you might want to be aware of. Now, another big disappointment with both of these phones is that neither of the two devices feature NFC. If you're not aware what NFC is, NFC allows you to make mobile contactless payments. This has been very popular, especially with the introduction of Apple Pay. Of course, there's also Google Pay, and then on Samsung devices at least, they have Samsung Pay. But these services are becoming more and more popular and being supported by more and more retailers where you can just go up, tap your phone, make a payment, and then move on. Now, unfortunately, you can't do that with either of these two phones. So if your current phone has NFC and supports mobile payments, and you want to continue using that, and you think that by upgrading to one of these phones, you're going to have that feature, then unfortunately, you're not going to have that feature. So that certainly is something to keep in mind. Now, as far as system software goes, I've got good news and I've got bad news. The good news is that the Moto G Stylus 5G does come with Android 11 pre-installed, which is good. And in addition to that, I did get the April security patch, but I haven't yet gotten the May or June security patch. But hopefully this phone will continue to get security patches as time goes on. However, with the Moto G Stylus 2021, and remember, this phone was launched in January of this year, but the phone still has Android 10. I just tried to update it, and it does not want to update to Android 11. I'm pretty sure they haven't even released Android 11 yet for the Moto G Stylus 2021. And if I had to guess, it might not even get that update at all or anytime soon. Now, I don't know that for sure. I mean, I really hope it gets Android 11, but I'll tell you what, they're pretty slow at deploying it, especially since Android 12 is right around the corner. So for a phone that launched in January of 2021, we're getting very close to this phone being outdated on software by 2 years. Now, thankfully, when it comes to security patches, they've been pretty good with that. So the phone did get the May 11th, 2021 security patch, and I'm sure it will continue to get security patches into the future. But out of these two phones, if you want to get a phone that has Android 11, then at least the Moto G Stylus 5G comes with Android 11. But with the Moto G Stylus 2021, I have no clue when this will get any updates. So that is a bit frustrating. Now, as far as the software goes, it is a pretty good software experience. I like all the extra bonuses that Motorola included here. And as far as the styluses go, which we'll talk about later on in the video, they have made software adjustments and changes here that give us additional stylus support. But taking a closer look at the hardware of these two phones, I already talked quite a bit about the front panels on the two devices. They both have very good looking displays, which is great, so no complaints there. Now taking a look at the left side of both phones, and by the way, both devices are made completely out of plastic. The displays of course are glass, but everything else is plastic. So no metal on the sides, no glass on the back. These are plastic smartphones. Now taking a look at the left side of both devices, a pretty identical setup here with the slot for the microSD card and SIM card. Then taking a look at the right side of both phones, they both have volume up and volume down. The button is a little bit smaller on the Moto G Stylus 5G, so keep in mind too that cases are not interchangeable between these two phones. So if you want to get a case for the Moto G Stylus 5G, it does need to be specifically made for this phone. And then you can see that we also have a major difference when it comes to the power buttons. Now obviously with the Moto G Stylus 2021, the power button is also the fingerprint sensor, which is one of the reasons why it is larger. However, I would have liked if the Moto G Stylus 5G had at least a little bit of a bigger power button. It seems a little bit small, but it does at least get the job done and it does work. Then taking a look at the top of both phones, we have the noise canceling microphone. Then on the bottom of both devices, with the 3.5mm headphone jack, USB-C port for charging and data transfer, we have the microphone, the speaker, and we have the stylus. Then taking a look at the backside of both devices, we do have different looking camera modules, but they both work pretty much the same. And then we also have the fingerprint sensor on the back of the Moto G Stylus 5G. But otherwise, on the back of both phones, we do have pretty minimalist setups here. I think both colors do look nice. However, I kind of do prefer the way that the Moto G Stylus 2021 looks because the fingerprints are not quite as obvious here. But it really comes down to personal preference. I think both phones at least do look nice, and I'd imagine that most people out there will be using cases with their smartphones anyway. Now, unfortunately, neither of these two devices have stereo speakers. Essentially what stereo speakers are is that you're getting audio coming out of both the main speaker on the bottom and also out of the earpiece when you're watching videos, listening to music, really doing anything with your device. Now for phone calls, the earpieces of course do serve that purpose, but there are other phones out there, and especially the more premium devices too, that have audio that comes out of both the bottom speaker and the earpiece at the same time, which really gives you louder, clearer audio. And in addition to that, the original Moto G Stylus that came out in 2020 did have stereo audio. So they took that feature out with both the Moto G Stylus 2021 and the Moto G Stylus 5G. It is pretty disappointing that Motorola has moved away from offering stereo speakers, considering that when they did offer that feature for their mid-range and budget phones, it really did make them stand out from a lot of the competition, so it's too bad that they had to abandon that idea. Now for the part that you've probably most been waiting for, and that is the styluses. So we do have kind of a little bit of a different setup when it comes to the styluses on both phones. It does appear to be a little bit bigger, at least at the bottom, with the Moto G Stylus 2021, but both styluses do function in the same way. You can click out, click in, very similar to the various Samsung Note phones that have come out over the years. But essentially, once the stylus is removed from the phone, you'll immediately get this pop-up on the right side, giving you some different tools such as a quick note-taking tool. There's also a GIF creation tool. There's also just a regular area where you can draw images, all that stuff. And in addition to that, you can add any app you want into that shortcut bar. So like I said, it does work in the same way with the Moto G Stylus 2021, but you can see though that the styluses definitely do feature a different design. So for example, if you own a Moto G Stylus 2021 and the stylus breaks, and you want to order a replacement, you definitely need to make sure it's the right stylus, because the stylus for the Moto G Stylus 5G is certainly different in shape as well. And the same thing applies to this one. If you break this stylus, make sure you're getting the right stylus to replace it, because it is possible that you might buy the wrong one. Now, as far as stylus performance goes on both phones, you can see that you can navigate around the devices very easily with the stylus. Also, in case you're curious, you can use the the styluses for each device on the other device as well. So that's kind of interesting as well. And then you can go over to the note-taking app. Okay, there we go. I wrote a little note there. I already did have the pen set on a different color. Didn't realize that, but you get the idea. Pretty much a similar experience. Let me change the color one more time. There we go. There we go. Woohoo! You can see that, yeah, it's pretty much the same experience. It doesn't really seem like the stylus necessarily works better with the Moto G Stylus 5G in comparison to the Moto G Stylus 2021. I will say though that one of my favorite things about the Moto G Stylus series, whether it's the 5G model, the 2021 model, or the 2020 model, is that if you're not really that into using the stylus, it doesn't get in the way. You know, you can store it in the phone very easily. It really doesn't add to like the thickness of either device. Both phones just feel like normal smartphones. It's just that they happen to have a stylus in the bottom right corner. That's definitely nice because it is possible that you might get either of these phones and not really use the stylus. But if you don't use the stylus, it's not really a big deal, because again, it's not like you're really giving up anything to get that feature. So in conclusion, which of these two devices is the better choice of the two? So as far as the Moto G Stylus 2021 goes, I would say really the only benefit with this device is that we are getting a side-mounted fingerprint sensor, which may or may not matter to you. You might even prefer to have it on the back of the phone, like with the Moto G Stylus 5G. But then also the really only other benefit with the Moto G Stylus 2021 is that the processor appears to be a bit more powerful, which results in us getting a little bit of better performance. But other than that, you're getting more RAM with the Moto G Stylus 5G, you're getting more storage, you're getting better cameras, you're getting newer software, you're getting a larger battery as well, and of course you are getting support for 5G as well, which definitely makes this phone more future-proofed. But I'm really curious to know what you think about these two devices. Definitely let me know in the comment section below. But this is Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G versus Motorola Moto G Stylus 2021. Give this video a thumbs up, let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next video.